December 2019. The year is coming to an end, and as usual, gaming outlets are gathering together their lists for the best games released that year. Gaming had a fairly strong year, with titles like Death Stranding, the RE2 remake, Devil May Cry 5, Fire Emblem The Three Houses, Disco Elysium, and virtual reality slowly coming back from the dead. But I personally felt nothing. No game really hit me as worth remembering after I had played it, and I tried a bunch of them. It was only at the end of the year that I casually came across one game. It's a visual novel that's still in development and whose appearance would turn most people off. That novel was A Changeling Tale, and I can honestly say it was my favorite game of 2019. Changeling Tale, or CT for short, is a visual novel being developed by a furry transformation artist named Little Napoleon and his team, Helmet Fox Productions. Together with his wife as co-writer, a fellow TF artist named Watsup, and a small group of other dorks, have set out to create an 18+ visual novel featuring transformation as the main trope. CT is built using the visual novel engine ren'py. ren'py is an open-source visual novel game engine that's been around for a while, and has been used in games like Doki Doki Literature Club, Kawada Shoujo, and many other indie novel projects, both safe for work and not safe for work. ren'py is capable of running on many different OSs as well: Windows, Linux, Mac, even Android, but the engine is used for more than just cross-compatibility and relative ease of use. This isn't just a VN with background images and character sprites. CT uses different visual effects like contextual camera movement with zooming and panning to make environmental movement within a scene fit the actions and text. There are particle effects like floating dust particles for indoor scenes, simulated light brightness affected by clouds, and other visual effects that do a great job in adding little layers of finish to make environments feel lively. It's no technical masterpiece, but it's really impressive to see little details like that. This is far and away from the features of old school VNs and some newer ones that don't quite take advantage of what you can do to enhance the reading experience. As for the character sprites, the characters are designed fairly well. No two characters look or pose alike. That goes for the faces too. Many novels these days fall victim to same face syndrome, where characters, both male and female, look almost copy and pasted with slight changes to mask the recycling of assets. That's not the case here. The sprites are fairly expressive, but they can be slightly static in posing. The sprites might have one or two different body poses, while most of their expression will come from their face. One character will have very expressive eyes, while another one might be more expressive with her mouth movements. No, not that kind. It's not Rembrandt, but they aren't flat and expressionless either. Our MC doesn't show his mugs, save for CGs, but his design is fairly plain and inoffensive. There's only one time I kind of don't like his appearance. During one scene, he has this dopey look on his face that seriously just makes me crack up. He looks like that guy from the Do You Know This Man wanted posters. The three romanceable girls' human forms are designed fairly well. Yes, human forms. What about their transformations? Two of the three girls have their forms occur more gradually, while the third can change between 3 stages: human, arthro, and dangerously cheesy. As the story on a specific path continues, their sprite will have added features from whatever creature their finished form is. It slowly adds features until they're fully changed into their anthropomorphic form. The TF sequences are done using both comic panel CGs, which change the images and stages for specific parts like hand changes or tail growth, and full-size CGs for bigger changes like general derification and the like. It also doesn't portray them in a painful manner like other pieces of TF fiction. No bone breaking or skin tearing, just magical metamorphosis. As for the non-TF event CGs, they're well done enough, but the best ones are ones I like to call impactful CGs. They're pieces that, I feel, stand above the others in attention to detail, and convey the emotion for a scene even without context. That's all just a fancy way of saying these specific pieces look really good. To curb spoilers, I'll only use one here right now. There's a scene where one of the sisters, Jessie, is sharing one last dance with the MC before she has to leave town in order to curb her werewolf transformation. It's an emotional scene for both of them, and as they're dancing, Jessie slowly starts to transform. The scene ends with her looking into a mirror, horrified that it's happened again. This CG is really well done. The expression of sorrow in Jessie's eyes, the scratches on the mirror caused by her new claws bursting from her once untouched sheer glovelets, the image shading that really looks like it's being set in a dimly lit back room. This is fantastically rendered. It's an emotional event, and it's fully on display here. Now, what about the smut? Well, it's not too bad. I mean, reviewing erotica is hard, but it's good for the most part. Vanilla. True vanilla. Not that face-sitting with thick traps kind of vanilla. Again, if it's too much, then there's always the block. Even if you take it off, the worst that you'll see, save for nudity and coitus, are maybe udders. Like, actual udders. But they're adorable udders. They even got freckles on them. Okay, enough about the sexy udders. Let's talk music. The game's composer is a man named Cheesy Dino. According to the website, he's a crazy Asian dude in a dinosaur costume who's had formal training in piano, percussion, and a mentorship with the New York Philharmonic. Okay. So, how good is he? Well, pretty good. His pieces are very piano forward, but there's also tracks that use flutes, acoustic guitar, strings, horns. Some tracks, funnily enough, remind me of the build mode music from the first Sims game. His music for the most part fits their scenes pretty well. He stated in an interview a while back that he looks at a scene while working on an accompanying track and then goes from there. And I'd say he has a good read for the scenes and that, from his current offerings, most of the OST is great. Tracks like Falling with Grace and Calm and Serenity are emotional. Tracks like Twirl and a Bow and Solasta Ambience are nice background tracks. I like SA's use of ambient nature sounds built into the track as a background layer. The track Changing Seasons is also very beautiful. It plays during an arrow scene and a couple of regular TF scenes as well. It begins with a really good piano start, slow but impactful. Then it brings in strings and a flute later on. The overall vibe fits that romantic scene nicely. But there's one jewel out of the current track list that outshines them all, and that is Home is Where the Heart Is. It's a fairly recent entry, but if there was an impactful track in the whole game, that would be it. It's entirely piano-based, but there's something about it that I can't put my finger on that always gets me misty-eyed whenever I listen to it. It's lonely and sad, but beautiful. And when it hits the 130 to 140 mark, where the keys sound really low, I just don't know how to convey the way that I feel. It's currently used in one scene during one route, but my God, it's perfect. Wear your best headphones, lay down in a quiet room, and just listen to it. You'll know what I mean. Now, since that's all done, we can finally move on to the story. The year is 1919, and the Great War, aka World War I, is coming to a close. Malcolm Caldwell is returning home from the war to his hometown of Achnacarrig, Scotland. 4 years away has mentally taken a toll out on our poor boyo, giving him a healthy dose of PTSD and an overall negative outlook on his future after the war. He finds distraction either in drink, hard work, or with the company of the people around him, and while it's not a perfect fix, it's one that helps for the time being. Whilst home, Malcolm reacquaints himself with his old neighbors, the MacLeods, Marion, the pseudo-matriarch, Jessie, the rebellious middle sister, and the free-spirited younger sister, Grace. Depending on the choices you make, you'll either get MC involved with one of them, or be condemned to a life of loneliness and even deeper feelings of existential dread. Sounds like your usual VN, right? Well, one evening a few days after returning home, Malcolm is visited by his old school teacher. She tells him not to get close to his neighbors. She doesn't go into detail, but just tells him to stay away. That same night, he has a nightmare where while visiting the girls, they somehow turn him into a deer. Despite this dream, Malcolm is in one way or another thrown into the path of one of the girls again, and from there we get into one of their stories and the changes that occur to them. So what makes this game so special? Well, the writing. Changeling Tale is really well written for a first-time R18 project. The characters don't feel like your typical visual novel flock. They also don't feel like your choice on which flavor of depravity you want to partake in once you get to know them. They're flawed, and each one of them feels a real, relatable burden placed upon them. From the feelings of failure in one's familiar duties, the desire to leave their small town and see the world, the dream of solitude and personal freedom, or to simply just see that there's more left to life than the scars and trauma of the past. Combine that with stuff like loss of identity and other themes that come from transformation as a story trope and do that well, and you have a great work of fiction. CT also does a great job of world building and future hinting. While I'm not going to spoil anything, you might see spots that look like they might be brought up in the future. The same goes for details on the different routes. Little tidbits that sound like the best experience is to see all the routes to gather the full story. I like that, and it does a great job in the setting as well. The war and other things are brought up, yes, but the terminology, everyday items, and social norms of the time shown throughout the story do make it feel true to its setting. It sticks to its period piece nature while still being relatable today. Mostly. Even its use of mythology is great. The Celts have a great amount of supernatural lore to draw from, and Changeling uses that quite well. If you're interested, Little Napoleon, the dude who's making this, has even done a presentation on the topic, as well as general transformation in fiction. Currently, each girl has 3 acts, with a final 4th act for each of the sisters currently being in the works. Right now is a good time to jump in because while the routes aren't finished, their cliffhangers leading up to their last chapters are fantastic. There's also 8 more romances planned for the future, but they will come as an Act 2 of sorts further down the line. While I like more potential content coming, the current routes with the sisters being finished would be a really strong start, and hopefully will be a good entry point for others once the game is released onto Steam. But maybe all of this is not enough to convince you. Maybe you still see this as some weirdo fetish game. Maybe I'm the biggest freak of them all for even daring to do this however long diatribe this turned out to be. Maybe you're right. But I do got one final trick up my sleeve. I'm gonna tell you why I love this game as much as I did. Skip to here if you want to be completely free of spoilage. So, let's get right to that. Let me tell you about Marion MacLeod. Just by looking at Marion, you'd be forgiven for writing her off as a simple good girl character type. And that's true to an extent. Marion is very nice, she's very willing to go out of her way to help others, and she's very capable in her duties as the head of her family's farm while her father is away at war. She's also someone who the player can empathize with really well. While she is a hard worker, she also puts her duties at the farm and taking care of her siblings above her own needs and wants. Even something as simple as going to the pub is out of the question. She's running herself completely ragged. Marion holds a heavy burden on her shoulders, and her reliance on Malcolm, and by extension the reader, with these worries really makes it easy to care about her as a character. That doesn't mean she's perfect. She has quirks just like her siblings. Marion is very honest with her views, especially in regards to her sisters. At times a little too honest. But that doesn't mean she hates them. She's protective of them and wants what's best for them, even if she doesn't always know how to handle it gingerly. Going down her route involves MC having to balance his duties on his homestead as well as having to help out the McLeod farm. This leads to a blossoming relationship between the two and the changes that pose a threat to Marion's previously normal life. As the relationship continues, her changes continue to get worse. This tests the couple, but in the end also brings them closer together than ever. Then comes the scene that caps off the entire route. After an avalanche of changes hit Marion all at once, Malcolm has become fully committed not only to his farm, but also with his bovine bow and assisting with her farm as well. One day, after some morning chores, Malcolm and Marion go for a walk to the nearby moor. The two are sitting side by side just watching the water. Suddenly, Malcolm collapses into Marion's shoulder and gives her a big kiss. After reflecting on all of his trauma from the war and the time he's spent with Marion, even with all of her changes, he's found happiness. He sees how much she truly needs her, how she gave him a reason to live, how she gave him his life back. He thanks her for that, and in return, she thanks him for being with her, for loving her the way that she is. This entire scene is set up so beautifully. From the CG of the two on the rocks, to the slow zoom in, to the way that it shows Malcolm as the point of weakness rather than just Marion, and the last line the scene ends with, like our protective perch above the stirring water below. Marion is my rock. All of this comes together to make this scene feel so genuine. There are tons of VNs that try to pull stuff like this, but out of all of them that I know, none of them can claim to be a fetish game and be able to pull off scenes as successfully heartfelt as this. This made me fall in love, not just with Marion as a character, as her sisters also have their moments, but the entire game as a whole. Now, this might all sound like waifuism. I can't deny it. I like a lot of things about Marion, both with her looks and her writing, but I feel that her story captures one of the aspects of transformation fiction that's easy to understand for people who aren't into the genre. The massive change in routine, the progression from coping to acceptance in both looks and someone's attitude and character, to know that despite the changes to one's appearance, that deep down it doesn't mean that they aren't the same person on the inside. I think it's a good starting point for many people that would otherwise be creeped out by the nature of TF. I feel that if you can get through her route, the other characters' stories will be child's play. It's slow to build up, it happens to a character that doesn't truly deserve anything bad happening to them, so you empathize with their struggle, and it does the changes without over-fetishizing them. Well, say for her sex scene. But again, skippable, and it's at the climax of her art, when the romantic nature between the characters is at its peak. Marion, I feel, is like a gateway to her sisters and the other characters planned for the future. She's a prime example of how transformation fiction can be done right. When I started the process of making this video, all I wanted to do was to help others see that this game wasn't just something for people to wank to prove that there can be pieces of fiction that might appear to cover a weird kink on the surface, but can actually be pretty captivating. Since then, going back in, gathering footage, listening to interviews, and picking up on small details that passed me by the first time have given me an all-new appreciation for this project. Definitely more interesting than most AAA games out there, that's for sure. Even in the scope of other visual novels, CT is leagues ahead. The Aero indie VN scene is no stranger to low-effort works. Projects that rely heavily on their fetish, ones that use 3D assets stills that lack creativity, or others that use their notoriety as a way to continue a stagnant development cycle, all while collecting monthly Patreon kickbacks. Changeling Tale does none of these things. The people in charge engage with their backers, either through streams, bi-weekly updates to Patreon, or on Discord. Nearly every part about it seems like the team has a real desire to make a good product. I could be wrong, but that's what I believe. I'm not saying this game is the second coming of sliced bread or anything. This VN isn't going to change your life, but writing it off based on what you see on the cover is unjustified. There's more here than just sex. There's a heart and soul here that slaps the shit out of other Western VNs, with characters you can care for. I can't say what's to come in the future. This is supposedly just part one in a bigger, longer story. There might be stuff later on that could make it harder for people to approach this like it is now. That's something I can't control. But I have faith that if they stick to the same approach of making a good story with great writing as well as quality eroge, that there might be a chance for the game to continue to do both and do them well. Come to FAP, stay for the feels. Or turn off the AO stuff and enjoy the game without feeling like you're getting a hollow experience. And after all this, I hope you can understand when I say that Changeling Tale is my game of the year for 2019, and that it's hopefully worthy of your time as well.